Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
We're back 2 weeks in a row. That seems like an accomplishment anymore.
Yeah, kind of. Except last week we were like, man, we don't want to just do creepypastas, and guess what I do? I was just, this week at work has been fucking nuts, so I didn't really have an option to like sit down and hammer out a real topic. And I apologize for that. That's my failure to you, the listener, the loyal listener, who's always been there for me, not saying anything about the show, staring at me blankly like I'm a fucking psychopath for doing this every week. I am so sorry. But I talked about a story, the last time I did this, it was from the No Sleep Reddit. And I mentioned there was a story in there about spiders. Mm-hmm. And I said that, you know, the thing is, it's pretty long. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it in the usual 30 minutes, 45 minutes we do here. So if we get around that ballpark and we're halfway through it, we're going to call this a two-parter, and we'll come back next week. I was just going to say,
I've got my guitar sitting next to me, so if it goes too long and I get bored, you'll just start hearing like some plucking in the background.
Which would freak me out, because by the end of this, I'll be sure it's a spider playing guitar. And
spiders are... there was one, I had to mow our front yard real quick before we did the show, because it really needed it, but it's been raining like every day for a month, and today it didn't, so I'm like, I better just do it. It only took 20 minutes. But anyway, when I had to open my gate, it's a wood gate, and this like big like wood spider. I don't know my spiders. It's whatever. It's what I think that's what it's called actually. But it's like kind of one of those light brown jumping spider things. But it went like scurrying across the fence, and at first I was like, "Oh shit, a spider!" And I'm like, "Well, this particular fence gets a lot of those like earwigs or whatever, the little gross fuckers with the pinchers on the butt." Yeah. And I was like, pinchers. "Oh well." It's like, yeah, like I don't love spiders, but you're outside, and as long as you eat those... And then I go to close the fence, and like 8 earwigs fell down and scurried away, and I'm like, you fucker, you're not even doing your job. Like...
You know what's funny? We were talking before the show about funny things you could find in the toilet after pooping.
We were.
And like one time I went to the bathroom, and I guess like contrary to what I was saying off air, I actually did. It was one of those like I just gotta go things, and I went and I shit, and I looked in the toilet, and there were like 5 of those fuckers crawling around in there, and it horrified me because I was sure they came out of me. You know, and I was like, fucking what? I gotta go to the hospital.
Yeah, it's one of those things where either situation's not like if you didn't poop them out, then it's like that's only nominally better because that still means that they were in your toilet. Like I'd certainly pick that over the alternative, but neither one's a good choice.
It was fucking scary as hell. All right, but yeah, we should get started on this because it could go a while. This is a story called "The Forest of 1,000 Legs." It's by a user named Lovzinski.
Sounds kind of sexy, actually, but...
that would be... I don't know if that would be scarier than spiders or not. Just a bunch of, like, fucking long legs with heels.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter how attractive the legs are if it's just a
disembodied legs.
Yeah.
Just mannequin forest. Little Lucy Lockhart ran from her daddy's frying pan. The forest of 1,000 legs killed her and then laid their eggs. That's a jump rope rhyme my classmates used to sing on the playground in elementary school.
What the fuck is wrong with your classmates?
It's really fucked up that they sang that because Lucy Lockhart was a real person we attended school with. So, yeah, kids are cool.
Yeah, it's just all fun and games. A song about like domestic violence and dying in the woods.
Little Lucy Lockhart got totally fucked up by a goddamn forest of spiders. She vanished when we were in the 2nd grade, so we must have been around 7 years old. The rhyme was loosely based in truth in that the official story was that Lucy Lockhart did in fact vanish into the Lockhart Wood 50 yards from her father Robert's house. but he wasn't chasing after her brandishing a frying pan to beat her with. I was too young at the time to understand what was happening, and it wasn't until much later that my mom actually explained it to me. It wasn't a particularly shocking story, just sad. I remember the day Lucy went missing, at least the first day she didn't come to school. It was Monday. She went missing the Friday before. My mother told me it was a few days before Lucy's 7th birthday and that Lucy had asked her father if she could have a birthday party at the house. I remembered that Lucy and I had been in the same group of friends, and I remembered her telling us that she was going to ask her dad about having a birthday sleepover. I especially remember being annoyed that she wanted it to be a sleepover because I was the only boy in the group and was never allowed to sleep over with them. I was still excited at the prospect of a party, though, as we all were, because we knew her father, Robert Lockhart Jr., was a retired entomologist. We just called him the Bug Man, and had lots of pretty preserved specimens like butterflies and beetles in cases that Lucy would sometimes bring in for show and tell. Anyway, according to my mother, Lucy asked her father if she could have a sleepover for her birthday, and he said no because she was going to spend her birthday at her mother's house, while their house was being fumigated. It was a normal enough reason for a 6-year-old to cry and storm out of the house, but running into the Lockhart Wood was a bad idea for any person of any age without the proper equipment. So I picked this story because, I'm afraid of spiders, and I wanted to see how effective this would be. The idea that there is a fucking woods out there so full of spiders that you, like any person of age, that you need proper equipment.
See, that's what I was waiting to hear. If there was a different reason, like, oh, it's just hard terrain and bears and stuff. But you
think there are bears with spiders, that many spiders in there?
Does a bear shit in the woods? Not those woods.
Here's the thing about the Lockhart Wood. Some people call it the Forest of 1,000 Legs, presumably to make it sound creepier than it already is. It doesn't help. There are roughly 4,000 species of spider in America, and the Lockhart Wood is a phenomenon on its own in that it's home to all of them. Not only that, but so firebomb this fucking place. You know that, like, a whole dumbass, like, patriotic thing, like, let's just bomb the shit out of another country. Like, we need to take care of shit at home.
There's a reason we invented napalm, yeah.
Yeah, like, it wasn't to fucking hurt each other. It was hurt the real enemy. Not only that, but there are documented populations of some spiders previously thought endemic only to certain countries, such as the Goliath bird eater, a couple of funnel web spiders, and some species of peacock spiders. Another fun thing about being arachnophobic is I know about all these fucking spiders. They just list after, like, with way too many, like, midnight Wikipedia searches, because I want to know what I'm up against.
Just so, this will probably ruin the whole story, but I did some quick math, and a forest of 1,000 legs is only like 125 spiders, so it sounds like they're exaggerating the danger.
Well, that's actually comforting.
Yeah.
That means, we could just send the National Guard in. We don't need to send the Marines. There's that myth that says you're never more than 3 feet from a spider at any given moment in this forest. Or at any given moment. In this forest, it's not a myth. It's filled to the brim with spiders. I think at this point it goes without saying that if you're arachnophobic, this story is not for you. So, I know how to pick them.
See, I'm just such a killjoy. I'm over here in my head, like, how is there that many? It's like, what are they feeding?
You're trying to do the math.
Well, it's like, how is it even sustaining? Like, because some of these spiders are like higher up the food chain than others, so they'd eat. It's like, this just doesn't seem like a stable ecosystem. Like,
you're not wrong, but I mean, there's also places like Snake Island.
Yeah, but they're all the same kind of snake, basically. I mean, there's a couple different kinds, but it's mostly just there's one kind of very poisonous snake, but there's a shitload of them.
I don't think that's true. I think there's a lot of variations there. Either way, they eat birds and shit, So, yeah. And these spiders do too.
Well, plus, like, it's Pizza Hut's within delivery range, so
yeah. I'd probably get along with spiders better if they just wanted pizza. The forest is naturally of great interest to biologists and arachnologists, but Lockhart Wood is private property, and restricted guided access to the forest was hard to come by even before Lucy Lockhart's disappearance. Afterwards, nobody could go in. Obviously, anyone could get into the forest if they wanted to. It's not fenced off or anything. Again, another huge mistake. We should be building a concrete structure around there, like the Chernobyl reactor.
Right.
But, they don't understand this. Obviously, anyone could get in the forest if they wanted to. It's not fenced off or anything. But there is a steep fine if you're caught trespassing, and nobody's exactly clamoring to delve into a forest full of venomous spiders anyway. You need
That's
the right...
a lie. There's a lot of weird people out there that would be dying to do that.
One asshole who thinks he's going to become the ultimate Spider-Man.
Right.
You need the right kind of boots, clothes, gloves, first aid kits, and knowledge of the forest to step past the tree line. The most common spiders at the edges of the forest are jumping spiders. Fuck this, dude.
I hate those fuckers, yeah.
Like, I'm not putting on an act here. Like, this fucking bothers me. Like, jumping spiders piss me off because they shouldn't have that ability.
And they really fucking... It's not like they have a little hop. It's like... Jumping spiders have a better vertical than I do.
Yeah, they're spring-loaded. Are jumping spiders, various wandering spiders, and orb weavers. Most people who emerge from the forest have a number of banana spiders clinging to their hair, jackets, startled by the destruction of their webs. If visitors are allowed deeper into the forest, the spiders get bigger and they lurk on the ground. According to my mother, Robert Lockhart Jr. lived with his father in that house for a long time. They were a father-son duo of entomologists from Alabama, but Lockhart Sr. had a focus on arachnology. He had bought the house and the forest specifically for its spider population, which also made it super affordable, and he usually worked from home. Robert Lockhart Jr. did a lot of work at a university 3 towns over. He married a professor there who taught evolutionary biology, and the 3 of them lived in the elder Lockhart's house until Senior's sudden passing during a study on tarantula hawks. Lucy Lockhart was born a year later, and Robert Jr. was able to retire from teaching and live as a stay-at-home dad while Lucy's mother continued teaching at the university. He still worked collecting and preserving specimens, mostly butterflies and moths, and had reports published in the entomology scene, and very, very rarely led guided tours around parts of Lockhart Wood for a price. My mother only got to know Robert Jr. once Lucy and I became friends. She said he didn't talk about the forest very much. She got the feeling that he was afraid of it. Like, no shit. Anyone... That's what I don't understand about, spider, or I guess arachnologists. How the fuck can you be I can understand being into something and studying them, but how are you not terrified at all times?
Yeah.
Because they're fucking, they're unpredictable, territorial, vicious little bastards. And, with the most fucked up eating ritual in the entire animal kingdom.
Well, and that's what, and realistically speaking, I was actually watching a comedian or something on YouTube. I think it was just one of those auto-played things, so I forget who it was, but they were talking about being afraid of spiders, and their friends why are you afraid of it? It's not going to kill you. You're 1,000 times bigger than it. It's more afraid of you. It's I'm not afraid of it killing me. They're just terrible creatures. I don't want a spider on me. And in this story, that's not even true, because it sounds like half of these spiders could kill you.
Yeah, a lot of them fucking can. And the ones that can't want to. They want to be as tough as their other fucking spider friends. When he and his wife divorced, my mom suspected part of the irreconcilable differences was Lockhart Wood. She never really pried into it, after all. She and Robert only spent time together because Lucy and I spent time together. Although I remember hoping they would get married so that I could go into the woods, because I'm a big dumbass. No. They'd get married so that Lucy and I could be brother and sister. Robert Jr. hated the forest he owned and made sure that anybody who stepped foot in it was dressed and prepared for the occasion. Which
Burn
is part
it
of the
down then, jeez.
Yeah, if you hate it as much as I do, what are we doing here, Junior? And prepared for the occasion, which is part of the reason why my mother never believed he killed Lucy when he was the prime suspect in the investigation. When Lucy ran off into Lockhart Wood that evening, my mom said Robert Jr. gave chase without hesitation, in socks, sweatpants, and a t-shirt. He must have received a dozen bites of varying severity the second he went in. He was in there for 4 hours. My mom was working at a night shift at the hospital when he was brought in, delirious and swollen all over. There was no telling how many bites he had received, and to this day my mother doesn't know how he survived. He needed antivenom that no hospitals in the United States could offer, and when he dragged himself back home after desperately searching for Lucy in the forest, he could only self-administer so much. Maybe luck and developed resistance was what saved him. He lost both legs below the knee, but he lived. From what my mom could gather in the weeks following Lucy's disappearance, the investigation was chaotic. Search teams entered the forest, but they never spanned it all. 2 officers on the initial search team were bitten by what was most likely a Sydney funnel web spider, and unfortunately both died. After all, the Sydney funnel web spider is otherwise found only in Australia, home of, every fucking evil venomous thing.
Right.
We don't have that anti-venom at the ready here in the States. Anyway, the search of the forest lasted maybe a week before branching off elsewhere. My mom says they couldn't, maybe wouldn't search the whole forest. More than one officer who searched Lockhart Wood left the forest and subsequently skipped town. Those who didn't leave might as well have. They don't get out much anymore. My mom doesn't want to know what they saw in there.
Spiders. I mean, I thought it was self-evident.
Spiders, man. Lucy never turned up. It didn't take long for suspicion to fall on her father before he was even discharged from the hospital. My mom says there was a point where he was handcuffed to his hospital bed, even though both of his legs had been amputated.
Well, that's right.
Given current events, that's actually, that ridiculous factoid is very true to reality. For a while, she couldn't tell if he was totally lucid because he would spend hours sobbing. That forest got her. The spiders got my baby girl. But there was no evidence to convict him of kidnapping or murder. My mom and the parents of Lucy's other friends and mine were involved in the trial as witnesses, and they all insisted that they never had any reason to believe Robert Jr. was abusive towards Lucy or that he would be driven to hurt her. I didn't know any of this at the time, as my mom responsibly sheltered me from the details of Lucy's disappearance. But obviously
I think the responsible thing would be like, look, this girl went into the forest and died. Stay the hell away from the forest.
We need to be telling the president that the enemy's on our soil. That would be the responsible thing. But obviously some other kids we went to school with got wind of some information, hence the morbid jump rope rhyme. It upset me a lot when I heard kids chanting it during recess. I was young, and I missed Lucy very much. It's been 11 years since Lucy went missing. It doesn't really upset me anymore. It's just a sad mystery that I still think about sometimes. The group of friends that Lucy and I shared stayed close until middle school, and then we all branched out a bit. I don't think any of us ever forgot about Lucy, though. I recently graduated high school, and the original group of us got together at a diner to discuss in amazement how we were finally done with high school forever. I love the amazement.
That doesn't sound like something that I would have done when I graduated high school.
I thought it would go on forever. At one point, I nudged my omelet around my plate and said absently, "It's been years, but I still wish, I wish Lucy could have graduated with us, My friend Stella leaned her shoulder into mine and knocked our mortar boards together with an understanding smile. Same here, bud, but she'd be proud of us for doing it.
What the fuck are you losers doing in a diner wearing your mortar boards still?
The conversation drifted elsewhere, but that poignant thought of Lucy stuck with me for a long while after that evening. It wasn't until the day before I went off for my freshman year at college that I told my mom I wanted to stop by the Lockhart house and sort of say goodbye to Lucy, if Robert Jr. would let me. Well, she shrugged over breakfast. I guess it couldn't hurt. You don't ever get over losing a child, but all things considered, he seems to be okay. He might oblige you. So later that afternoon, I drove across town towards that dark looming forest that stretched into the sky on the horizon. I hadn't been to the Lockhart house in over a decade, but the sight of it instantly, it's just dawning on me. They were going to have a sleepover at the house just outside this fucking hell forest.
With nothing to keep, like, but one of the things that's been in my mind the whole time during this story is that there's just this forest and that the spiders apparently just have this understanding that they stay in the forest because I can't keep these fuckers out of my house and I'm not anywhere near a forest.
That's like, fundamentally, we've talked about it before, but that's fundamentally my hatred of spiders is they're super territorial. They'll bite you for fucking anything, but they come into your shit.
And it's not even like my house isn't ideal for a spider. There's nothing for them to eat, really, an occasional fly. Yeah. But here they come. It's like, go out there. The outside, you get the entire outside world. Just let me have my house.
Yeah. But like, I won't. If a spider is like outside and it has a web and shit, I'm not going to fuck it up. Like, as much as I hate spiders, I'm not, I'm not trying to fuck up nature here, even if it has it coming.
Yeah, but we've talked about it. I'm one of those people that, as much as I hate spiders, your hatred goes much deeper than mine, but I'm not a spider person by any means. But I, even if they're in the house, try to like catch them in a cup and take them outside. I'd rather do that than kill them. Now, if I
had a better understanding of which ones were venomous, maybe I would do that. But I just assumed they could all take me out.
That's the thing. I live in Ohio where there's like one venomous spider and I'm not 100% sure what it looks like.
I don't know that.
Yeah. But yeah. So it's super responsible to want to have a sleepover at this spider death house. Yeah, let's bring
children in on this. I hadn't been to the Lockhart house in over a decade, but the sight of it instantly made me happy. I no longer mourned Lucy. I only cherished the brief time we knew each other as children, and I had lots of fond memories in that house. As I pulled into the gravel driveway, I saw the curtains in one of the front windows shift, so I knew someone was home. He might not want to let me in, but there was no harm in trying. I went up to the front porch steps and found a wooden hanging of a Luna moth adorning the front door. It had no sign of grime or weathering, and the pale green paint still had its glossy finish, so I guess it was fairly new. I don't know what I expected from Robert Jr. Maybe that he was too far gone after the loss of Lucy that he wouldn't bother decorating anything. But it had been more than 10 years, and recovery is possible. I knocked into... Had it been more than 10 years? He said he was 11.
No, they said they were 7 when she disappeared and I graduated. Okay. So yeah, it's been just
11 years. All right.
Yeah.
All right. And recovery is possible. I knocked and he answered a few moments later, frowning curiously at me from the gap in the door. Hey, Mr. Lockhart, I floundered a little, stupidly, because I hadn't planned on how I was going to talk to him. I'm Aaron Lovzinski. You know my mom, Jane, at the hospital? The door eased open a bit more, his face relaxing with recognition. Jane's boy, yes, you were one of Lucy's little friends, weren't you? Come in, wipe your feet. I'm surprised you remember we were friends, I admitted, stepping inside and wiping my feet on the floor mat. It looked like a monarch butterfly. I remember all you kids, Robert Jr. said with a wave of his hand, leading me inside. His prosthetics clicked on the linoleum. It was Lucy, you, Stella, and there were 2 little girls named Hannah, wasn't there? You were the one that cried a lot because you never got to stay for sleepovers. Yes, sir, that was me, I said, embarrassed. You gay, son? It was a startling, straightforward question tossed over his shoulder as I followed him into the house. There wasn't anything accusatory in his tone, though, so I said yes. He grunted. Knew you'd be fine to sleep over with the girls. Could have spared you a lot of whining and crying. He took me past numerous framed bug specimens as we... I don't know why they added that. That seems really unnecessary. He took me past numerous framed bug specimens as we made our way to his living room. It was a big room cluttered with bookshelves and workbenches with papers strewn about. Dozens of terrariums of various sizes dotted the room and lined the walls like trophy cabinets. The only gap where the den opened into a kitchen. A bright desk lamp illuminated the whole room, and the light bounced off a magnifying visor headset and a laptop screen. It looked like he had been dissecting a large beetle before I knocked on the door. It was good to see that his passion for bugs hadn't been destroyed after losing his daughter to the Lockhart Wood. "So what brings you here, Scooter?" he asked, going into the kitchen to retrieve something from the fridge. "Well, we graduated in May, and I'm leaving for school tomorrow," I explained, "and I just I still think about Lucy a lot, so I was wondering if you had kept any of her things over the years that I could see and sort of, remember her by, if you're okay with that, sir." Robert Jr. came back over to me with a shrug and 2 beers. He said, "Ain't much a little girl has to her name but Hello Kitty bed sheets and Beanie Babies." Oh man, Beanie Babies. I couldn't help but grin at the memory. That was always my go-to gift. I gave her a bunch of mine. "What, you want them back or something?" The way he says that, I like, well...
I like that this guy's just like, eh.
"What, you trying to take my Beanie Babies, son?" Off my startled look of chagrin, he chuckled and handed me the second beer. "I'm messing with you, boy. Her room's this way." He led me down a long, familiar hallway down which Lucy and our friends and I had sprinted recklessly over a decade ago. I recognized a few framed insect specimens that we had knocked from the walls in our rough housing fits. We went into Lucy's bedroom at the end of the hall, and it was virtually unchanged from how I remember it. The walls were still pale pink and decorated with pastel-colored cross-stitch artwork made by Lucy's late grandmother. The canopy bed was neatly made, the Hello Kitty bedding crisp and unfaded from years of disuse, the shelves upon shelves of stuffed animals, and an army of Beanie Babies, gifted by me, populating their own full shelf. And surprisingly, a long terrarium against the wall with an enormous black spider sitting motionless underneath a black light. Fuck, dude. That's the worst thing ever.
Yeah, like right by your bed. Yeah.
And just a room full of Beanie Babies and stuffed animals, and then just in all of this girl shit, there's just a fucking spider. I hate it. I recognize that spider. No way. That's not... Robert Jr. flipped on the lights, which turned off the terrarium's black light. The massive spider retreated into a hide with a twitch of its long, slender legs. He grunted. "That's her." Lady Legs was a type of huntsman that Robert Lockhart Sr. had discovered in the Lockhart Wood and kept for 10 years before Lucy was born. There were plenty of live specimens in the Lockhart house over the years, but Lady Legs was the only one that Lucy seemed to cherish as a pet. Robert Jr. had said in the past that some tarantulas can live up to 25 years old, but Lady Legs wasn't a tarantula, and if this was the same Lady Legs from that time, that would make her over 30 years old. Do huntsman spiders live that long? I asked incredulously, moving to the terrarium with a fascination I hadn't felt in years. Robert Jr. stood in the doorway with his arms crossed and an expression of distaste creasing his features as he looked at Lady. "None that we know of, besides that one." "She's even bigger than I remember," I murmured, my breath fogging up the glass as I tried to peer into the spider's hide at an angle, but I couldn't see her. "Far as I can tell, her size depends on her enclosure," said Robert Jr. "She won't get no bigger as long as she's in that tank." I saw Lady's leg move in the hide, then turned my head to look out Lucy's bedroom window. It faced the deep gray-green mass of Lockhart Wood. I stood, absently tracing my fingers through the condensation on the bottle in my hand. "Lady came from the forest, didn't she? How big do they get in there?" Robert Jr. didn't respond. I looked over at him. He was downing nearly his entire beer. I want to think that has nothing to do with the spider.
Oh, yeah, he's just...
That's just how we drink. He finished it with an angry-sounding hiss and said finally, "Ungodly big. Anyway, take your time in here. Do what you want. Look at what you want. I'll be down the hall." "Okay, thanks." As he started to leave, I remembered the drink in my hand and held it out to him awkwardly. "Oh, hey, I'm not 21. Ain't nobody gonna snitch on you. He left the room, and I hissed open the beer. Which is how I'm gonna phrase when I drink beer now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just hiss open a fucking beer.
I can't wait till I have one that like needs a bottle opener and I don't have one, so I can hand it to somebody like, can you hiss this open for me?
That's what the spider is for. You poke it in, and it pops it open with its venomous fangs. I don't know how long I spent there, meandering around fondly. Maybe an hour. I took a spider Beanie Baby off the shelf. There's a spider Beanie Baby? That's awful. I took a spider Beanie Baby off the shelf and held it as I looked around. I stood over the dresser looking at the framed pictures on top of it. Most were of Lucy and her parents, a few of Lucy from toddlerhood to age 7 holding the gargantuan lady legs in her comparatively tiny hands. I was in a couple of pictures too, group pictures of us and our other friends at birthday parties, our messy little faces smeared with cake. I found an old elementary school binder from the first grade class Lucy and I had together, where the first activity of every day was to make an entry in our journals following a simple prompt given by the teacher and then draw a picture to go with it. Naturally, lots of Lucy's entries were about Hello Kitty, playdates with me and our friends, and bugs. Some of them made me laugh, like her outrageously mangled spelling of the word centaur, and several entries about herself and Lady Legs as Spider Lady Centaurs, which is, and those at home I know is a Dark Souls boss.
Yeah, and I've already pictured that's where the story is going. Like, she won't be dead; she'll be like the Queen Spider. But
God, I hate that. I really feel fucking chills right now. I hate all this imagery. After a while, I just stood at Lucy's window looking out at the Lockhart Wood as I finished my beer. I'm a lightweight when it comes to alcohol, so I was pretty buzzed. The Forest of 1,000 Lakes had never looked so eerie. The angle of late afternoon sun didn't penetrate the darkened woods, but it glistened on countless spiderwebs suspended along the tree line, emphasizing how dark the forest was beyond that. It was strangely inviting in a predatory way, like the lure of an anglerfish, how it had swallowed Lucy up.
No, it's not. It's the exact opposite of that. You see that, and you're like, nope, spiderweb, going the other way.
Yeah, if you're an idiot, you're like, I want to check it out. Movement outside the window caught my eye. I looked over and saw Robert Jr. standing under the car part, facing the forest, downing another beer, a backpack hanging from his shoulder. He was dressed in different clothes from the flannel shirt and cutoffs he had been wearing when he let me inside. He was wearing a heavy jacket and a hat, with a different set of prosthetics that had shoes. He looked like he was dressed for going into the forest. I left Lucy's room, crossed to the other end of the house, through the screen door off the kitchen. Robert Jr. didn't respond to the wooden rattle of the door banging shut. You're going in. It wasn't a question. I was incredulous. Ain't been in there since I lost Lucy, Robert Jr. said pensively. Think it's about time I go back in one last time before I torch it. Well, at least he has an end game in mind. Yeah. So we're about at the halfway point. I can keep going, but if you want to keep this the usual length.
Oh, man, that's up to you, because it's a great, stopping point, because it's right at the start of, the whole front part you could tell is exposition setting up the story. We probably should do that. As much as I hate to, I'm actually eager. This is one of those creepypastas that is as spidery and bad as that is from the spider standpoint. I'm actually enjoying how it's written so far.
Yeah, I'm totally in.
There was that kind of weird random line about the "Are you gay?" But whatever. They're trying to set up the character. I get it.
Yeah, representation.
I was about to say that. We need representation in media, and if it doesn't come up naturally, just throw it in there.
Just just have one character be like, "You queer?" And but if we want to call this part 1, we can do that for sure. Or we can.
Yeah, let's just do that. Because I'm really being lazy. That just means that I don't have to prepare anything for next week either.
Yeah, me either, technically.
Even though I have topics, but they're not put together, but I know what to research. But anyway, now, thanks for that. I'll never go into the woods again. And we haven't even got to the, to that part of the story, really.
Yeah. So, join us next week when we go into a fucking goddamn woods that should not be, and you shouldn't. Like, he would give tours. Why? Fucking why? What are you gonna find there? More fucking shit to bite you.
Yeah, he's basically John Hammond, isn't he?
Yeah, dude.
Welcome to Spider Park.
Yeah, it's the same. As much I hate spiders way worse than snakes, but it's the same thing with Snake Island. Like, why the fuck do we have a Snake Island? We have the ability to shape the world however the fuck we want, and we lose. Like, pandas keep dying, fucking penguins keep dying, but we don't do shit about the problems. You know?
That's what. Yeah. It just speaks to the horror of Snake Island that we found it, and we're like, we're not even going there to destroy this. Let's just pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah, they actually tell you don't go there because the snakes might win, and we can't drop a bomb on them because then they might learn how to make fucking bombs.
Yeah, they're snakes. They just coil up and it would bounce the bomb back at us. Like, fuck.
Like, they just keep, like, I'm just imagining them doing like an Ouroboros thing, but to become like one giant spring, and then like a bomb hits it and then just blasts it back. And that's science. That's
yeah.
They're totally capable of that. Amazing what you can do when you don't actually have a skeleton. Anyway, yeah, so we will do part 2 next week, and thank you for joining us for part 1. Thank you. Yeah, you fucking on. You make it awkward. It's you. It's like fucking years of doing a podcast, and you just you still don't know how to be like, see you next week. You're like, yeah.